I watched the new Superman last weekend and I loved it. I loved how gleeful and hopeful it was, and it was kind of infectious. I think with the 2 hour runtime that they had, or just under 2 hours, they achieved a lot in there. Notably, one of the most powerful things they did, as I think they absolutely trained the hell out of me to just react with such gleeful hope every single time that main theme started playing. I would get a little choked up every single time I heard those horns. Like they Pavloved me. Every single time I heard those horns start playing, I felt like something in my heart kind of like just sink, but not like in a negative way. The second thing that I would say that they did, and this one was a big one for me, was it made my girlfriend interested and very attached to a character who, at its core, is a quote unquote good natured character. I don't know how I can describe how big of a deal this is because my girlfriend is the kind of person who very much always aligns herself with the morally gray hot elf character. This is big. She usually doesn't like characters that are good, like quote unquote good, you know? She doesn't think that they're interesting. She didn't think that she liked Superman. Her first character in any of my campaigns was a half-elf rogue who killed her own father, if that tells you at all what kind of player she is and what kind of characters that she likes, because that's kind of the way that she leans. But even though those are the characters that she generally likes, she was tearing up as well whenever she heard those horns, whenever that main theme started playing. I swear to God, it's so good. I don't get it. It's like I don't know, it sticks in my head so much. I'll die on the hill that a character does not need to be edgy or tragic to be interesting. A character like Superman is very interesting when done well, but it's a lot about how the world actually reacts to them and how the story works around them. I think honestly, a character in a vacuum is pretty not that interesting. Even like the edgy ones, even the ones with very complicated stories, they're not that interesting in a vacuum. Without the world and other characters to define them, like just their actions don't really make an interesting character alone. It's how everything else works around them. Like Superman's a good dude. He has great morals. He just wants to help people, and I love this version of him. It's because of how everything is framed. Ginny D has a great video on this, not Superman, but on just not needing to have a tragic backstory, and that's a lot more on the player side of things. I want to focus on kind of the DM side of how you can support a player character who has specific traits. And this is because I can recognize that it is hard work to make a quote-unquote good character work. Scenes and drama just kind of come more naturally when your characters are a little bit broken, they have a little bit more problems, but it doesn't mean that a good character itself can't have good scenes. I won't be talking about literally anything specific, I'm just using broad strokes, but if you want to go into Superman completely blind, then feel free to stop. I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you don't want to hear someone talking about it, feel free to tune off. Okay, now that that's out of the way, when you're crafting a character as a player, and when you are crafting a scenario as a DM, it should be done together because this is a collaborative game, it's really important to establish what you find makes an interesting character progression. In my not so professional storytelling opinion, I have no experience in this other than D&D, but I think a character's arc is interesting when their stances on anything are challenged in some way. That's what makes a character arc interesting. That could mean a lot of different things. For one, it could just be like maybe their stance in society or their position in society is being challenged. It could be their stance on a topic. It could be their literal stance in a fight. There just needs to be something that gets them to waver in the way that they hold themselves in the world. So, usually, I think a good story kind of demonstrates how a character both is affected by the world and how they affect the world. I just don't necessarily find a character interesting if they don't struggle with anything. For example, One Punch Man is interesting because his struggle is actually his boredom. The fact that he had become so powerful that he is so bored with fights. If the show was about a guy who was as powerful as him, who didn't get bored and just kind of defeated everything in his way, that wouldn't really necessarily make for a very interesting show. In this latest rendition of Superman, he does pretty much everything you expect Superman to be able to do. He flies, has laser eyes, has like very strong lungs, and he's strong. He's not incredibly strong. He's not punching through dimensions. He's not a speedster. He won't be beating Metro Man anytime soon. But he is very powerful. While he's very powerful, he is not impervious to being like hurt. He bleeds in this movie. Despite all his powers, what really matters to Superman is the fact that he is just a good guy. And every single fight that he's doing, he is prioritizing saving lives, making sure that, property isn't getting damaged. He's making sure that he's trying not to kill whoever he's fighting. He is doing everything to preserve as much life as possible. He has ideals, and they are constant. These are his moral compass at which he kind of reacts to however he does. So, as a player, it's important that you make a character who has consistent character traits. So, if your character has these ideals, what are their ideals? How does it inform every single action you take as a player at this table? And that's pretty much all I have on the player side. Make sure that you make a character that's consistent, but also make sure that you are playing that character that's consistent in a way that is engaging with the story, and also making sure that it's fun for the other players at your table. It's communication, it's a group game. But that's pretty much all I really have from the player side. I don't get to play a lot, so I don't have much advice on that side. Now, how do you as a DM highlight your player character's key tenets? As a DM, you should be building a world and scenarios that highlight these key aspects of your players. This doesn't even necessarily mean the villains. It doesn't mean the bad guys always have to be the contrast. It could just be the world around them itself. Even other characters just around or like NPCs help define these player characters. How do they stand out from everything else? For example, in this movie, Green Lantern he's a hero, but he's kind of a dick. He is very flashy. He is being funded by some kind of corporation, and he's obviously not solo. He doesn't care as much about protecting all the lives around him. He's a little bit more reckless. There's contrast in that. Then there's the world. The world is kind of what you would expect. There's geopolitical conflicts that put into question all of Superman's actions. And then above that, there are also people who have been positively influenced by Superman. There's people who inspire hope. There are people who want to be better because of him, or want to help other people for it. And you can see that there is a positive influence and also a negative influence for everything that the character is doing. You feel the impacts in that world. And then you have villains like Lex. Lex Luthor in this movie is petty, he is selfish, and he obviously has a disregard for human life. He kind of stands as a, moral opposition at every step for Superman. Superman in this movie is constantly being challenged in his good beliefs, in that his purpose and everything he does is meaningful in the way that he would want it to be. He wants to be seen as good, and he keeps getting challenged on that. And with all of these different challenges, he kind of, builds up, and it's either does it break him or does it kind of solidify his beliefs. These elements of a world where the story kind of beats against the character and challenges their specific ideals is great to see whether or not you would strengthen them, you would continue. It just makes for a more interesting arc, because it's okay if a character stays with their ideals, but sometimes you just need to rattle it a little bit. So Superman's a pretty easy example. Let's go for an even more broad example. Let's go to our handy dandy alignment chart. I know a lot of people don't care for alignment. I still like using it. It's broad. It works. All right. But if you are a lawful character, or your characters are lawful, put them in a world where things are more chaotic. There's more chaos. Do they bring law to it, or do they succumb to the chaos? That's something that can kind of challenge them on their tenet there. If they are a chaotic character, bring them somewhere lawful. Maybe, again, does the world change around them? How do they react to it? How do characters react to them? If there is a world where most people are a little bit more morally good, whatever that means, throw in You know, what does an evil character do in that world? And then what does a good character do in a world that is mostly evil? What does a character that trusts too much do in a world where no one trusts each other? This is a very simple way to view it, but I think it's very effective and it just gets the point across. We're not professionals at a table. We're just trying to make simple stories. And simple stories really just highlight what these characters are. And of course, plot twists and everything like that are interesting. But above all else, you know, D&D is very character driven, player driven. They define themselves. So to kind of highlight these players, make a world that highlights their traits. For example, you want to make a character that does well. Maybe you put them in a world where, you know, nobody really wants to take favors. Can they get that process started? Or if there's a wizard character and they're all about rejecting necromancy, put them in a situation where necromancy might be the only way out. Okay, so this started off as a video about good characters, but ended up being more about how worlds define characters more than the characters themselves. But point is that good characters are still valid. You can still make a tragic character, that's fine. I understand tragic characters are a lot easier to do, especially when you're playing the theater kid game. But just don't discount like a good-natured character. Good guys are cool. I love them. You know, there's something about people helping people. That's something I've always liked. As a player, make a character that is consistent and interacts with the world and also doesn't piss your table off. Very important. And then communicate with your DM. What kind of story do you want your character to tell? As a DM, make scenarios that work around your player characters. And then above the table, ask them, hey, what kind of story do you want to tell? What kind of story do you want to play? What's the tone? So anyways, just communication. I feel like each of my little scripts just end up being about how people should talk to each other. It's a collaborative game after all, so that should be kind of the whole point. So don't discount, you know, good characters. I just think they require a little bit more finesse on both parties, as a player and as a DM, to kind of really highlight and make scenarios that highlight those traits. And then just make sure that in order to highlight things, you're adding a little bit of contrast. That's pretty much it. This video and the script kind of went off the tail end. I wrote most of this during a lunch break at Taco Bell, so if it's a little bit messy, I think that's why. Okay, just a side note for this video. I am a professional illustrator. I am working on a project called Coulson's Guide to Calderon, and also additionally I work on a little project that I'm working on with one of my players. He's a 3D modeler. I do the illustrations and concepts. I hate 3D. He does the 3D for me. We are making 3D miniatures. We're currently just printing them, but we do eventually intend on selling like the 3D designs. But we have like an Etsy up with our first 3 designs that should be up by the time this video is out. So if you're interested in those, feel free. They're mostly designs from my own campaign, but I think the designs are interesting, and we're still working on like getting better and polishing up our skills a bit more. But feel free to check that out if you can. Thank you.